Perfect. Great. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the open seminar on the theme of rural co-working and how networks and communities are changing through the effects of the current pandemic. I will moderate this open seminar together with Bastian Lange, and we have two speakers also invited. We're happy about that they're joining us. So first of all, to my person, I'm Viktoria Heinzel. I am a research assistant and PhD student at Stuttgart Media University, and I'm working at the Research Department for Creative Industries and Media Society, shortly CREAM. And there I'm working together with 6 other professors coming from totally different study programs. We're a very interdisciplinary research team. And what we're researching is the impact of the creative industries on society and economy in general. And also, a very big theme of ours is new work approaches and what comes with that, the new working models such as co-working, making, innovation labs, etc. And also, of course, a very recent theme is rural co-working and its rise, probably also through the pandemic.
Okay, thanks, Victoria. Hello, everybody. My name is Bastian Lange. I'm a trained geographer, teach geography at University of Leipzig. And parallel to that, I'm running Multiplicities, a research and consultancy office here based in Berlin. My interest is mainly looking at alternative spaces, degrowth economies, maker spaces, open labs, and other types of niches that have popped up in different spatial types, mainly in cities, but also recently more and more in peripheral areas. And that has led me in the last years to 2 networks that I will shortly introduce. The most important for today is COST. It's a network funded by European Union called Geography of New Working Spaces and the Impact on the Periphery. This is one network. The other one, because it's a joint collaborative approach today, is the research group on collaborative spaces, RGCS. It's mainly based in Paris, but has a wide worldwide net of chapters that are interested to research and exchange upon collaborative spaces. And I think in the last months, I would say since March and April, we have questioned, sitting in mainly larger agglomeration, what is happening with these smaller niches that have popped up in peripheral areas and rural areas. And we had simply lost also a bit contact to some of these spaces. We were not able to travel to these spaces anymore, so we could exchange with them. And for sure, we know that these are very fragile structures. And so we became interested also together, we're exchanging on a book proposal together with Viktoria in the last months. We ask ourselves, so what is happening there? How do they cope with the situation? How do these activities, networks, and spaces that are starting to transform peripheral areas and provide new working spaces, what is happening with them? So these were very generic questions we were posing, and we thought it could be of interest to invite two, well, very informed and speakers and practitioners, and also some who support others by consultancy work on the transformation of peripheral spaces. So that's a bit the context that brought us together. And I think Viktoria will now also introduce our 2 speakers, and we will be very interested to hear what they have to tell us from their spaces.
Yes, we are. So we have with us, very happy about that, Axel Watzke from Studio for Art in Berlin. So Axel is building up a multifunctional village at Predikhof, which is in the state of Brandenburg in Germany, and he's doing it since 5 years already. And just that you have a picture, Predikhof is around 40 kilometers eastwards from Berlin. And then we will also hear from Tina Eberhardt. She's the initiator of the Network for Creative Industries in Freudenstadt, which is in the middle of the Black Forest. And this network is also existing already since 5 years. And also here that you have a picture, Freudenstadt is approximately in the middle of Stuttgart in Germany and Strasbourg in France, somewhere in the middle. And yeah, right now this network in Freudenstadt is driving a project of a common collaborative workspace since 2019. And with that, I would like to hand over the floor to you, Tina. You can tell us best about the genesis of your network and, of course, give us insights on how the current crisis has affected your network.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Victoria. I had to smile as you said Freudenstadt is in the middle of, and I was thinking nowhere, because that actually pretty much sums it up. I'm going to share a slide with you. So just to give you a bit of a visual impression, this is us, that's the network. And as you can see by the header image, we are focused on the creative industries in the area, and creative industries means mainly architecture, product design, a form of carpentry, design-oriented carpentry, and basically everything that has some connection to wood and the rural area, since we're in the Black Forest. And this is us, really in the middle of nowhere. And we started 2015 because we had the issue in this area that all the creative workers, the creative entrepreneurs, and the potential for innovation and knowledge was just going away to the metropolitan areas, because there was no network, there was no connection, there was no kind of ecosystem for creative industries where we are. At the same time, it was a bit of strange because this area is rather wealthy and became wealthy because we had a lot of those southern German inventors and business people who in the 50s and 60s set up family-run companies who've been going global during the 70s and the 80s. And they're now really massive. And that's what our area is coming from. And we thought, well, you need to keep that creative potential somehow. And so the township of Freudenstadt was willing to start a network. And they hired me as a project developer. And since 2015, we're doing this together. And we're trying to develop the area as a creative base to young people, to creative entrepreneurs, and just to give you the ecosystem and kind of an environment where in the rural areas where creative industries can thrive and where creative industries enjoy being. And one of those, a spin-off of this network is something called a creative lab that started in 2018. And basically it's a creative center like you have in the metropolitan areas. We're thinking about a co-working space, about a fab lab, about a maker space, and all those sort of things. And the interesting thing is the idea wasn't placed by the creative sector, but by the politics. The local politicians, they said, hey, this network is going so well and we really need it and we appreciate it. And let's look for a creative center just to found an institution where you can that you can use as a base for the work. And that was a gorgeous thing. And we did a lot of trial and error during our development, and we learned our lessons, obviously. And one of the main issues is just getting information around in the rural area because the geographical distances are rather long. And at the beginning of this year, we finally felt like, okay, now we arrived. We know what we want to do in the next years. We have all the people and the ideas in place. And then COVID happened and we had to put it on a stop. And now we have, we have the issue or the worries in our heads. That's what our work looks like. We do a lot of developing workshops, a lot of face-to-face things. We get together in teams, we work out on ideas, and we try to bring forward new topics and projects. And we're still finding our way how we can adapt this kind of work and this form of work to a COVID world. We're thinking, the thing is, in the rural areas, it's very important just to get together physically, because that's what happens not often enough. You're separated too much as you're just spread out along the countryside. So we're a rather non-digital network until now. And we have to find new ways to do our job and to continue our project. And well, there's a few challenges and lessons learned I've summed up for this event today. We're learning how to get a non-digital network through social distancing. We started with some digital offerings and events, and we realized there are different people taking part than we usually have. So our network is actually growing, which is a good thing. But we're also kind of starting anew again, getting to know our new participants and their ideas and their needs. And the big issue is dealing with anxiety and uncertainty, because we don't know how long the situation is going to last and what the world is going to look like post-COVID. And the thing is, how do you keep the spirit and the motivation? That's something that bothers me as a project developer, because you're always a bit in the public eye. And in times like these, when everything just slows down, it's easy to be forgotten. And it's easy to have questions arise like, well, are they still there? Are they still going on? Or has this whole thing died now? So that's the thing the challenges we're facing at the moment. Some lessons we've learned is that communication is crucial. Keep talking, keep telling people you're there, just keep chatting, just set up online meetings for the sake of just having a chat, just telling everybody how you're doing and asking how you're feeling. You don't have to have an agenda or project running, just talk to each other. Something that's always very useful is ask those who have done it before. We're very lucky to have developed a network of other projects in the rural areas where we just can turn for advice or say, hey guys, what have you done? What has worked for you? And very important, connect with partners. That is especially important in rural areas. We had very strange situations. Our network is focused on the creative part of the creative industries, as I said, like designers and architectures and stuff. But there is always the culture, also the cultural sector with cultural actors, and they have little connection to our network yet because we're rather focused on the design topic. And when they got in trouble during COVID, they happened to use the COVID hotline of the local chamber of commerce, who in return had no idea how to deal with creative needs and creative industries. And they didn't know that we are taking care of this topic as well. So we're kind of sitting next to each other, not knowing of each other. And we realized it's very important just to look around locally, what other people are there around, what other institutions are there around. Just give them a call, talk to them. Hey, we're here, we're doing this. Can we help you? That's was very helpful during the last few weeks. It was also nice to get new connection to partners. And another thing we learned is just relax. As long as you're still kicking, you're not dead, and everybody is in the same boat at the moment. And we're all having our challenges and our worries with COVID. And I think there are a few changes going to happen once this whole situation is over. And I think what's going to come up is a kind of a hybrid form of organizations and offers. I experienced myself during last weeks. I was able to take part in events or congresses or whatever that I wouldn't visit normally because the traveling distance would be too long, or maybe if you have a kid at home to look after, it's even worse sometimes. You just can't be everywhere. And using the mixture of digital and non-digital offerings, or maybe doing events on setting up events on both platforms, that could prove really, really helpful and great for the future. Just as an example, I took part in an arts and architectural city tour the other day in Detroit, which happened via Google Street View. That is something you wouldn't do normally, and an offer that wasn't normally at place before COVID. So there are really, really big chances there for new projects and ideas. I think what we desperately need are new value systems and new evaluation systems, because when we try to measure the success of a project, all we look at is the quantity. At least in southwestern Germany, as sad as it is, you just have to be honest here. It gets the value and the success of a project gets measured by how many people are involved, how many money is coming out of it, how many input and turnover is coming out of it. But I don't think that's a sufficient way of evaluating success. The typical 9-to-5 day, the typical quantity-orientated business, I think, is slowly coming to an end. And we need to find ways for ourselves as well to value and evaluate our work. We need to set up like clear milestones. What do we want to achieve? When do we think we have achieved this? what indicators do we have for correction need and for change of route? That's something we have to develop post-COVID. And another important thing is I'm dealing a lot with politics in my network, in my project, and there's always a tendency to kind of sugarcoat your appearance and like making things look good, like it's all going great. And there's nothing wrong with being honest when you're struggling. And it's nothing wrong with telling you're still a very little network, you're still a very little co-working space. There's nothing wrong with it, because if you're actually in for it, if your heart is with it, if you know and you believe in yourself that this thing is gonna take off, then others will believe you. The size is not the crucial point. It's just you have to believe in what you're doing, because if you don't do it, nobody else will do it. But actually, that's all it needs. Attitude can take you a really long way. And finally, what I would really love to see is an increasing significance of global communication and collaboration. We're always talking about globalization and international transfer of knowledge and inventions. But I think it's very, very fruitful if we just not just turn to our next door neighbors asking them, hey, how are you doing it? But if you also turn to your neighbors across the border and say, hey, what is your situation? How are you dealing with it? And to think about what can we help or what can we take out of it? That is a kind of my little dream, to have this whole thing a bit more international in terms of we talk to each other, we share experiences, and we try to help each other to develop our spaces and projects. And that was my speech. Thank you so much for listening. I've really enjoyed this.
Okay, thank you. Before we go over to Axel, you're following us on Facebook. You have the opportunity to place questions and comments. They will be directed to us, so we will see it and we will start to collect it. And after the presentation of Axel, we can come back to your questions, just to let you know this. So shall we move over to Axel and hear your experiences from your work that you do in Predico. Hello.
Yes, first, this is Axel, and I started, as many of a lot of people in the creative industry in Berlin, and I just share my screen to show you some slides as well. Yeah, first we founded a co-working space in Berlin. This is this very old building, but it's close to the center of Berlin, and it's an old kindergarten. And it was founded 15 years ago. I think the word or the term of co-working spaces was not imagined yet then. It was meant to be a place for creativity. A lot of members of the creative industries are working there, and now it's kind of a dinosaur. It's 15 years old, but when people come to Berlin and looking for the 90s, the wild 90s of Berlin, they now find more in modern and sometimes boring city, because all these wild places are gone, or a lot of them. And I think the Heikonaut, it's this space, it's already there. And from this point, we started to think about the rural areas, because I think it's a question of your age and your family. We wanted to go to the rural countryside and want to build up new things. And we have no idea how the things are going there. Like Tina said, she's there, she's in the network and in the middle of nowhere, and we're outside of nowhere a little bit. But we had a bunch of people with us. It's 40 people, and we found a place. It's called Predico. You see it here. It's a real big farmer yard. It was used in an industrial way. as well. And now 40 people with 30 children will move there, and not only to live there, but to work there. And to give you an idea of this project, I will talk about the network future places, because Multiplico is one of these kind of projects. But the first thing we do in projects is to found a network, and we found these network future places, and it's we started with 10 places all over Brandenburg. Brandenburg is like this green donut outside of Berlin. And of course, a lot of people that want to enjoy the countryside go to Brandenburg. It's a natural thing. And Brandenburg suffered a lot of things in the last decades. It was deindustrialized in the last 20 years. A lot of people went to bigger cities, to southern Germany, to Freudenstadt as well, I think, to work there, because there was a big lack of employments. And now the direction is going the other way. And we found this network to create a platform for political power, because all these little spaces were small. They are small. They are several buildings, several styles of buildings, very old buildings like 100 years old farmer houses, or a little bit bigger like castles, but as well former kindergartens, industrial buildings, etc. And when they work at their own, they're not that powerful. There are a lot of, in a lot of cases, there are foreigners there. That means they have no network. And so we found the future places, and now it started with 10 places, but I show you the actual thing. It's the Kreativorte Brandenburg. It's a map of Brandenburg, and now we're talking about these places. That means during 3 years, there was really like a boom of people going outside and found to find places and to build them up. And as Tina said, this spring we start, or after 3 years of work, we were really settled. That means we wanted to start to build our houses there. We wanted to start to create a real strong network. We have all the knowledge from the countryside. We have a lot of people financing all the things, and then COVID came, and our learnings towards COVID was really like two things. On the one hand, there was no problem because our work is really digital. All our processes are digital. Our workshops were digital and are digital. We use, for instance, Trello for democracy process and to make decisions. And it's going well. And that was really an advantage of us, that our work is so digital. So we there was no break, there was no problem for us. On the other side, the business model of all these places you see here is that people go there to work there, like in co-work spaces or retreat, like the Coconut here. Their business model is you have companies, you have groups of people going for 2 or 5 days there to work, to concentrate, and then going back to Berlin or to Hamburg or the bigger cities. In COVID, this business model were crushed or crashed. And now, but these places are really agile. They create new strategies, and now they say, okay, if you don't you are not able to work here anymore, then come to live with us. And then they create a no focus on co-housing instead of co-working. That means they say, okay, our place now is only in use for instance, for 3 months or 6 months or 1 year. And this shift in strategy was really successful because, of course, the COVID topic has created new possibilities in home working, in remote working, etc. And that's why the people are even more mobile than before. They can work from everywhere in several jobs, of course. And that's why now these places that are meant to be workplaces change into living places. And that's really interesting because when we have a look to the next 5 or 10 years, we think with a lot of people that the idea of rural places to be the offsite, that means sometimes you go there to have a good time, to have a focus on it, on your work, on your team. I think this will change in the opposite way a bit. It could be possible that these places, these rural places, have develop new qualities to live there and not only to be there for several days. And then if you need a retreat with people, you need more cultural impact, you need more input, you need new ideas, then you go to the city, but not in the other way. That means the focus on your life is not only anymore on the city. And we had some interviews with bigger companies in Berlin, and all their employees now are in homework situation and working remote. And they asked them, okay, now COVID is a little bit, the modus is now in a more normal way. Please come back to the office, and nobody wants to. That was really interesting because in these bigger company structures where you have a lot of power plays and you have a lot of fighting each other, the idea of working at home has a strong impact on the personalities of the people. And these people decided not to go back to the office and say, no, I have no problem with home office. And if this is a thing that will last, I think we can think about new qualities and new possibilities for rural places in a bigger way, not only as a nice spot on the map, but more in a way that the whole balance between cities and rural places get a new balance out of it. I think this could be interesting in the next years.
Okay, thank you both for your comments. I think there was one very interesting parallel line of thinking, and this is the effects and the attempts also to initiate new relations. You know, you, Axel, said relation between the city and the periphery for a changed work-life balance, so to say, and also finding a new geography for living and working. And also, Tina, you mentioned a lot of relational work when it's about, tying people, institutions, political parties, other externals together, also not just from a local or regional scale, but also from an international scale. So ask the wider neighbors from your point of view in maybe France or Strasbourg or other side or other areas in order to, well, be active on finding new relational knots in order to not to be alone in this period in an area where maybe, the number of peoples you work with is very difficult to reach and to approach. So this is just from my side a short comment, just to generally speak out to the others. You're always welcome to place question. They will be transferred to us and allow us to integrate you via comment or commenting or question to our two speakers.
That's right. Yeah, I would also like to add a comment, because I just recently, in the end of May, I was part of the Europe Co-working Symposium, and I also introduced the topic of rural co-working, and I have afterwards like a very short QA session, so I don't have too much time to answer the questions. And one of the last questions was actually the most important one. So people were asking, what would it mean for rural areas in terms of gentrification? Of these rural areas, if more people that are right now working in the cities, like the business workers now, would work from rural regions, what would it mean for those rural regions? And there are, of course, a lot of positive things that goes along with that. I mean, probably one of the most important reasons would be the restoration of proximity between home and work. So actually, we're living in times of digitization, and we're still traveling every day long distances to city. And we did it since 1915 in earlier times, but we have the digitization, we have new possibilities, we can connect and work mobile and digital. So actually the work can come to people, so we can work from our space. So also what comes with that is that if you would install more co-working space in rural regions, you would promote also the relief of the transport infrastructure through less commuters on the road. And probably, yeah, this would be a most important benefit for co-working space in the countryside. For example, in Germany, we've also like 2/3 people traveling every day or 5 to 7 days between their homes and workspaces, and even with long distances, and they experience stress, and they lose valuable time with their family and friends, and probably to get in change with neighbors, or just time to relax. And at the same time, they contribute to a large pollution of the environment as well, although certainly not wanted most time, but still it happens. So also this thing, the relief of the transport infrastructure would be a very positive effect, goes along with that. And then, of course, we would improve the quality of life of people. So people would save a lot of times, especially like part-time workers, along with mothers in between of them, would save a lot of time just doing the work from the local municipality or probably local co-working space. They would improve the compatibility of family, work, and life, community, and yeah, sharing economy, a culture of helping as well. And another I think very important thing is also that you would increase the local added value in production in this region municipalities, and you could revitalize empty floor spaces. You add more value probably to abandoned village shelters. So there are a lot of things. I was also talking with colleagues about what is positive about it, but now I had a chance to give it again to you, because I remember the symposium was a very short time to say that. But I think there are so much chances that goes along if we could work from more rural regions or municipalities, and we would install more collaborative workspaces. So.
Okay, there's a question. There's a question coming up from our audiences. I just read it in order that all hear it. So, in your opinion, I think it goes to our speakers. Will companies allow their employees to work from rural co-working spaces close to their homes? So it's challenging the question distance. So if you work in the rural area and you work in a rural co-working space, so do you think that will allow companies to do so? Do you have any experiences with that?
I think that's not a question of allowing something. I think they have to, because in Germany you have really a problem to find employees, and if you could decide between working remote or going 50 kilometers every day, I think the decision is quite clear. As I know from friends from bigger companies, there was a big discussion the last year to allow 1 day a week for homework or for home office. And now the whole company is working 5 days a week in home office, and it works. And I think this decision is made by COVID.
I'd like to add, I think it depends a bit on where you are, because the interesting thing is, if you compare the project in Freudenstadt in the Black Forest with Hofpredico in Brandenburg, is in Brandenburg, the creative spaces, they're all used by people who left the city and who are consciously, and they wanted to be in the rural area. In southwestern Germany, it's still a bit the other way around. People want to go to the city and they want to leave the countryside. So we still have to take that jump to make the countryside as a place of being attractive, and then enabling people to work in rural co-working spaces so they don't have to commute to their jobs in the cities. That's one thing. Another thing is, I think it's a lot about translating and finding the right vocabulary. I had a discussion the other day about new workspaces, new forms of working. And when we're talking about new work and co-working spaces, it all sounds a bit, experimental to the conservative corporate sector. But actually, what we're doing has been done before. Remote work is a very old thing. Every company in Germany that has gone global had to apply some remote working structures. It's a common thing. Many, many people are working remote. They're just using a different vocabulary to describe the type of work. And I think that's something we need to do, to find a common ground in the wording and in the explaining the ways we work. And I think I'm optimistic that people and companies will allow their employees to work in co-working spaces. As Axel said, COVID taught us how to do that. And there are also benefits. Companies in the rural southwestern Germany, they are struggling to find new brains, to put it that way, and to new ideas. And they are very well aware that you don't find new ideas in your classic office space where you're just locked up 9 to 5. And they know that you have to get out and to meet new people and to think in new ways to stay competitive in the market. And I think that's a reason why they will allow their employees to go to co-working spaces or other spaces to work. Yes.
Thanks for both comments. I don't want to be pessimistic, but challenging from a different point of view. I think these days, at least, since COVID is not over, I think these spaces are more or less closed. The spaces I saw are sometimes big, sometimes small. I mean, how is it possible to imagine that, you know, these very fragile structures make their way over the next month into maybe 1 or 2 years? How can they survive when sort of people are so far not allowed yet to go to external spaces on the basis of their contract and their work? If they work as freelancers, for sure you have a greater degree of autonomy to choose the place you want to, but still, especially in Southwest Germany, I think there's a high degree of fully normally contracted workers, employees within these company structures. That might be different in the creative sector, where you have a higher degree of independence and autonomy and flexibility. But maybe, I mean, practically speaking, because you're also mentioning this degree of collaboration among many like-minded teams, groups, and externals, how is it possible to maneuver over the next month into next year, practically speaking? If one of you wanted to comment. I like your optimism, of course, but let's be also a bit realistic for a moment, you know, to see how these spaces will survive till 1 year, you know, half year. I mean, we had these outbreaks in the last days in Germany, and I think they won't be the last ones. So is then the remote, the rural area, a kind of even a safer space, you know, to go to work if you have the autonomy and if you're not bound to with your family to school situations and so forth? Or how do you cope with the situation? Could I come to Freudenstadt and work there for 2 months?
Our co-working space is still in planning, so I could give you ideas and thoughts on that question, but I think it would be much more interesting to hear Axel's experiences on this point of view.
The places we know in Brandenburg, okay, they, as I said, they have really a problem with their business model now, because they're closed for the temporary co-working. But on the other hand, they changed their strategies to think about a little bit more in the future, like not the last months, but more the next years. And then next years, I think the idea is not to create a space where it can work, but to create a more in a holistic way, an attractive way to live and work. And I think the next 2 or 3 months, it's really hard for these spaces, but often they have a interesting structure, because somebody asked about the gentrification of rural areas, and a lot of spaces choose a collective ownership of these places, because of course when we have to invest there 30 million euros in the next 30 years, I think, and nobody has this money, and we don't know where this money will come from. But when we will invest it, this place has a really a big increase of finances, and I think that it's an invest not to think about an exit strategy, but if you are collective and you can't sell this place, then you invest in people and not in structures. And I think the next 2 months is about waiting for the end of COVID a bit. It's like this. And on the other hand, to work on more longer term strategies. And this is about co-living, not about co-working, I think.
Okay, we have some other questions that arised. One specific on Tina, because in your presentation you mentioned the necessity of defining new measures or indicators for the performance of a co-working space, so that it should not only be about the growth and the money that it makes. Do you have kind of examples on what they could measure? Do you have thinking about that already? Do you have ideas? What could be different measures for the success of a co-working space or like a community?
I think there are no indicators yet that could be generalized, but what we didn't experience was we articulated what we want to achieve. And then after we did it, we looked back, okay, what happened? And how do we evaluate it? Do we think it's been positive, and why? Or do we think there would have been room for improvement, and if so, why? Mm-hmm. And that's what we communicated in the past when we had to talk to public organs, when we were talking to the media. That's where we did it, and we had good experiences by doing that. Because it is a highly individual thing. Every project has a different philosophy, a different situation, has different resources. It's sometimes very difficult to compare projects with each other. And unfortunately, measuring the success or developing indicators is still highly based on comparison. And I think we need to look at our own projects and to find our own individual indicators and way of measuring successes. And I think it's just important to be true and to be authentic and honest, And it is not wrong to compare yourself. For example, when we do an event, a creative event, a public event, and there are 20 people turning up. So at the first thing you would say, whoa, 20 people, that's not that much. And I wouldn't call that a success. But Freudenstadt has only 20,000 people, and 20,000 when you really take the remote places into account as well. So the core city has just 8,000 people. So 20 is not too bad, because if you compare it with an event in Stuttgart, who has where there are over 600,000 people, you might have 100 people turning up. And if you put that into relation, the response you get in relation to the size of a community, then you find your own indicators and ways of measuring success. That is an experience I had made, and which was rather good. So maybe that could work for somebody else as well.
Okay, thank you.
There's one indicator we measure, and that's the attitude. Because when you work in this special case in Brandenburg, you have these Berlin crazy people going to a lot of conservative areas, and of course there are conflicts about attitudes to new work, to diversity, etc. And what we do is to have kind of a questionnaire about attitudes, and to measure it on the start of the project. Like, could you imagine to work with other people in one room? Or could you imagine to not to know to earn your money in the next 5 years? Is it a problem for you or not? And then after 3 years, you can take the same questionnaires, and if the project was successful, these attitudes were changed a bit. Because on both sides, on the creative class as well, because there is this Berlin arrogance that we all know the solutions for our problems, and I think this attitude change as well.
Okay.
There's another thing that could be used as an indicator, and that is how many people or initiatives or projects could benefit from your work.
Mm-hmm.
So that is something I always like. So we try to cooperate with other initiatives in the area, with entrepreneurs in the socio-cultural sector, or just some people who are doing something cool where we think, okay, it would be nice to collaborate. And just if you how many people were able to take something good, positive, and something new away from your events, that is a good indicator, I think.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. There's another question came up, basically asking if in Germany, if there's a national or local government that's doing something to support co-working spaces in rural areas. They ask if there's, in your opinion, something positive that the public can do to support rural co-working spaces. And maybe what I have in mind, maybe you can contextualize it, Axel, to look at a bit what this initiative Smart Country, sort of an approach from the Ministry of Economic Affairs in the state of Brandenburg to support rural areas on their way to become more agile, more flexible, more effective by using digital technologies. And it turned out, when you can comment on this, that these Zukunftsorte, these future spaces have been sort of came up bottom up in the last years and have been neglected first, but then now acknowledged and honored. And maybe how do you perceive this? Is there any direct support, or is it mere symbolic support? How do you see this from the point of view of the Smart Country initiative?
I think there's no direct support of co-working places, but there is a lot of support for the idea of a new work collaboration. For instance, in the North Rhine-Westphalia, there's a they support the idea of the third places. Third places, like a theory of Ray Oldenburg, I think, from the 70s, 80s. like places they are not about living and not about business. These places in between, where people meet and where the society talks to other people. And there is a special program for rural areas. When you support this idea of a third place, it doesn't matter if you are a company or a theater or a co-working space, then you get money for it. I think I see like you have the idea of a co-working space, and this address a lot of several ideas like new collaboration, a new kind of agile working, low hierarchies, and I think for every aspect of these surrounding ideas, there you can get money in Germany. But I know no program, especially for co-working spaces.
Well, having a federal system in Germany, it depends highly on which state your project is based in. That's a bit of an issue, I would think. It would be, I think it would be easier for all of us if there would be some national kind of platform or program where you could get information or maybe even support. And my experience is there are a lot of programs going on, like smart rural spaces or digitalization projects, governmental projects that are supporting new ideas in co-working spaces. But my experience is, at the end of the day, the actual work has to be taken in your own hands. If you don't get down and if you don't do it if you don't start it bottom up, those projects and those funding options will not going to start it. They're not going to carry it. They're nice to have in my experience, and it's great they are there because you get knowledge, you get resources, but to start it, you need to do it on your own, and sometimes you even have to take the risk. You don't know if you're going to get support, and you just have to take it. So there would be work to do and room for improvement, in my opinion.
Yes. I would like to add something, because I think especially in your example, Tina, in Freudenstadt, because we're also working very closely to you, I think because you said you really had to hang on in there and stay and communicate a lot, but still I think was the regional development of your city, which kind of really helped you as well, building up this network. And then just recently we had this pre-study that we did that to help to build up this collaborative workspace or working space that you want to install in Freudenstadt. And I think I had a feeling that they kind of do not spare any effort and even expense to help you. So this is like also something that happens in Germany, that you have some good examples when you see somebody probably also like you as the initiator that was very much burning for this project, and then after some time they kind of get in and helped you as well.
That is true. There's local communities and townships, they go a really long way, especially in rural areas, to help their communities and to help projects. That is really, really great. But they also cover all the expenses. So until now in Freudenstadt, we haven't yet tried to apply for any public funding, because a big problem is there are a lot of funding projects going on, but they're all highly categorized. And we don't fit a category there. So that is the problem. They are focused on economic support or on cultural support or on social support, but this crossover thing, creative industries, rural area, countryside, and that very specific mixture of our projects that doesn't fit a category yet. That's one of the main issues, and that's the reason why we didn't bother anymore to apply for funding, because another thing is applying for funding is extremely complicated, and it takes so much time and manpower to do that, and you need so much knowledge to do it. And we felt that, okay, if you take that manpower and money and just do groundwork, it takes it just as far.
I want to ask you or comment if there is any attempt on a on a national scale or maybe even a European scale to address your needs in these times, in COVID times, for greater support, for acceptance, because also what we observe, or at least you all observe, that there's a lot of money now rushing from the state to lift up the economy again, to support it. And so it's a political question, you know, to raise your voice for these new types of work, for greater acceptance, for these spaces as a future-oriented hub for balancing life-work balances, periphery, centrality aspects. So it has very, very positive, I think, effects. And I think we all are also a bit committed to these positive effects. But what is happening currently? Are you interacting with co-working spaces in Bavaria, in other states, in order to raise your voice for greater acceptance when the state is trying to support the economy? It's spending billions of euros and pushes it, pumps it into the system. How can you comment on this?
I just could say that the co-working spaces are not part of the system, and that's why the money is not going there, in my opinion, because it's so new. They don't understand it. What this this is no work, because there's no real company. There are no machines, so it's not a German kind of work. And we just try to connect the eastern 5 countries of Germany in our Zukunftsorte network, that we have more power. But there are a lot of national initiatives, I think, but more on a level on new work and digitalization, but especially for co-working spaces in rural countries, it's outside of any idea of economy, I think.
Okay, just to comment on this, because yesterday I was reaching an email from Ulrich Bär in, I think it's Kiel. He's sort of organizing a co-work community association starting in Schleswig-Holstein and reaching out to Germany. And I think the great attempt of them, I can send you it's German-based, but at least for our German readable audiences, I could send you the contact to him. And I think he's very much on this political agenda to vote for sort of a right for mobile work that he associates with other federal networks on the Cowork Land, your Axel network on the Zukunftsorte Brandenburg, and other types of associations. So I think it is also a bit of a political agenda now, starting just to comment on this, that there are sort of some niches and pockets ready, you know, to bring these regional networks together and to place it in front of the Ministry of, I think, social work and labor, like Hubertus Heil, and to place it there and raise the voice. Just to comment on this, it's not my business, but it was, I received it yesterday, and maybe it helps us also to, you know, to connect a bit these existing networks which operate more or less on a federal level so far. There's another question that popped up. If you want to comment, let me know. Otherwise, I would go and reach out to another question that asks, can rural co-working spaces transform their current business models for something more of a cooperative approach? When we do the next webinar, we also ask to place the names there, that we also know who is the author of this question. So I cannot tell you who raised this question, but I hope you can. Could you comment on it, or can you say something to us, or sort of, yeah.
I would say, because it's a question of can, and I would say, of course, they can. The co-working space, I know they have a cooperative approach, and that's why, as I said, now there's a new aspect of it. It's this co-living thing. A lot of co-working spaces now found associations. I think there is no English word for Genossenschaft, right? It's a really special term. a German term. Association. Okay, it's an ownership, a public, or not a public. It's not a private ownership. It's an collaborative ownership. And I think most of the co-working spaces I know adding this aspect to their business models on the base of a collective ownership. And I think that's the cooperative approach I know.
Tina, do you want to comment on this? Or not? Okay.
I think rural co-working spaces in my part of the country, in our cultural setting, they have to be kind of a cooperative approach. When I think back on how the network for the creative industry started, it was a private-public partnership thing in some terms. So the idea came from the creative sector, and the township said, okay, we're gonna take it in our hands, we do the fund, we give the money, we give the infrastructure. And I think, to me, that is kind of cooperative. And a cooperative approach in terms of who is using it, who's going to using the co-working space, who's running it. I think the idea we try to develop is a co-working space that isn't run by one single organization, but that is run by multiple partners from the economy, from the creative sector, from the public sector. And I think that's a cooperative approach that can go into the future as well, because yeah, we need to cooperate. We need to cooperate. One of the key issues we have here at the moment is we're still so divided up. So the economy is doing this, the creative sector is doing that, and politics is doing something else. And we need to move closer together and cooperate and collaborate. I think that message has slowly but steadily settled in at the various places. At least that's what I hope.
Great, thank you. We have another question, just try to figure out. There was somebody asking if if there's a company offering any incentives like a boucher for remote workers to work in a co-working space or general in a collaborative space. It goes in the direction of corporate co-working, when probably also employees have the possibility from the company to go in a co-working space. Could be urban, could be rural co-working space. Do you know any examples, or do you have experience of that? Probably seen that, heard about that?
Not yet.
Not yet in this way, but in the other way, to rent an office in a co-working space. And there are a lot of co-working spaces in Berlin that had the business model of very cheap prices for freelancers and very expensive prices for companies. It's kind of a voucher, I think, or an incentive. For instance, there's one desk, a hot desk for 50 or 80 euros a month for a freelancer, but for a company it costs like 500, like 10 times. And that support the freelancers, and the companies are willing to pay this price to be part of the bunch or part of the game.
Tina, do you want to add something on this question, or?
No, actually said it all.
That's fine. Well, I also don't know anything about the boucher or incentives, but of course, there are already some examples when corporates are sending their employees to co-working spaces just to get out, to work from another space, to get in contact with creatives there. I know in Mannheim, in the southwest of Germany, there's big industry, BASF, who's sending their employees to a creative center called C-Hub, and it was doing it for a very long time. So there already this exchange of corporates and those workers, creatives in the co-working space is existing, but I don't know the offer for boucher or something like this to do it. But
I think a lot of companies are considering the permission to their employees to go off to co-working spaces as an incentive in itself.
Probably this way. Yeah, you're totally right. I have another. Yeah.
Just to add, I think the present time is not just sort of the fancy time, like, you know, reaching out, having a nice inspiration to leave the routinized workplace and go to a fancy, lively and inspiring co-working space. It's also, I think, a COVID condition, and mainly, you know, to what we see in some areas, that hotels that are not used rent their spaces on a daily basis, not just to stay overnight, but at least, you know, to leave the bed quiet and use sort of the desk arrangement to work away from home when you cannot go into your workspace, but you're still using existing physical spaces, not in a collaborative and community-oriented way, maybe a bit in the entrance area, but then you reach out to another space. Maybe these users, I think, are important to ask to what extent they can play a role when some corporate companies in peripheries cannot provide working space. The co-working space is maybe then for a bunch of 10 or 20 people all of a sudden too close. So where can they go? How can they create a distance, at least over the day, from home, when, you know, family and children are sort of filling the family house or the apartment? Where do you go to have a bit of a quiet and productive time? So I think this might be very, very practical questions to ask. Where can we go? The same we could apply for schools. You know, where do they go when they don't have the appropriate space to keep distance? So these are just some questions. They're maybe more directed to how do we deal in these sort of strange times of COVID that is not yet over?
Yes. Okay, I have another question which goes in a total different direction, but when we talk about co-working, we always talk about the value of the community, kind of like a unique selling point of this co-working space. So right now in the recent crisis, what was your measures to keep that community spirit alive? What did you do? Did you have different routines? Because normally if you go in your physical co-working space, you have probably breakfast together or an evening event or something like this. You see more often, you probably get more often exchange. What were your measures to keep the spirit alive? Who would like to add something?
We did two things in our co-working space in Berlin. The first thing was like a Zoom party thing every Friday, and then we create a lot of Zoom rooms that were connected to the real rooms. That means there was a toilet, there was the kitchen, there was a working room, and so you could. It was like more performative. Artsy thing, I think, but it was really it started with 3 people, but in the end I think all of the 35 people were there, and it was that was really important. And then they started to arrange their flat like the real rooms in the Heikonaut, like in working space and this kind of stuff. And the other thing was we have a big garden in the co-working space, and a lot of people have kids, and it was kind of possible to meet there, and it was on the weekends. That was not about working, but of course when the kids were there, they it was kind of a little bit illegal, I think, sometimes, but for it happened that people said, okay, our kids cannot live in a flat anymore. They have to have this space outside, and this is really important for our co-working space, that you have a garden. That was really an advantage, not only to have offices.
And Tina, I mean, you don't have a co-working space yet, but I think you also get an exchange with all your network members and keep in contact in this time. And I think you had also an event where you were planning some things you want to do this year. Do you want to add something on this?
Well, one strategy that we're using at the moment is just kind of develop expectations and just get people an idea of what the near future could look like, what we want to do, and just to keep the motivation and the spirits by doing that, so they have something to look forward to. And a lot of things, communication, and an issue of our network at the moment is it's sometimes a bit of a passive community. People the people are enjoy to visit events and get new input. But the part of, okay, getting involved and participate and bring something to add, that is still under construction, to put it that way. And during times like these, when you do digital events, it's all about participation. There's no immediate use coming out of it, but the connection and having talked to each other and having seen each other again. And we didn't go into that because we thought, okay, that would be too attractive at the moment. So we just started to communicate our plans and our goals for this year that have been put to a stop by COVID. And yeah, that's it keeps our spirits high as well. So you have something to look forward to, and you can draw steps for the way, and steps that you can start now. So it's kind of an activating yourself and your project.
Great, thank you. And what I would be very interested to hear your opinion on the potential of virtual co-working. I mean, right now through the crisis, we were also using a lot of different tools such as Zoom, Jitsi, Microsoft Teams, etc. Then I also get to know that there are already existing platforms such as like Sokoko or Remo, where they kind of really try to build up a physical co-working space on a virtual level, where you can also get in and choose in which room you are. And it's very interesting. Also, I remember from coworkies.com the offer that the existing physical co-working space in the community could totally, they would help them to build up a virtual co-working space. I mean, right now we can again go back to the physical space and meet there, but still I have the feeling that this option of virtual co-working could stay as an offer also forever, or could virtual co-working be also as a permanent workspace in the future? What do you think about that?
I think it would be a very, very interesting addition, because one thing in the rural area is you have to travel long distances, wherever you want to go. If you want to go to the co-working space, it won't be next door. You will have to travel for at least 15 to 30 minutes. Maybe you're still dependent on a car. You can't use public transport, depending on where you are located and where the co-working space is located. So doing a double-sided thing and co-working space with a digital addition, I think that could be very interesting, because sometimes you often are in the countryside or want to stay in the countryside in order not to have to travel again. And it would be a huge relief for people who have to take care of kids or who are limited in their schedule. It would be very interesting. I would like to do that.
For me as well, I think I don't believe in virtual reality co-working spaces that to build up the same place in a virtual reality. But I think the concept of augmented reality could be interesting, not in the technical meaning, but more in the meaning of addition, like Tina said. And I think tools like Mural or Miro, where can visualize projects that is really interesting for us, and in addition to little things like, for instance, we have in our kitchen there's the cooking slot every day, somebody's cooking, and of course there's a little webcam where you can check in the morning, is there somebody cooking, and more important, is there somebody cooking who is able to cook. And I think these combinations of reality and virtual tools are interesting. But I think in the end, it's okay not to travel anymore so much and to work more online. But it's not a 100%. You need this physical space to be a human. It sounds a little bit pathetic, but it's like this.
I think it's totally important to address a humanistic view, because I mean, those pandemic situation has distanced necessarily from each other for a long time. And I think it has created also very tragic effects for many people that are not coping with it. So I want to ask, maybe in the last round, a bit looking in the future. I mean, what do you see from the point of view of co-working spaces? What kind of practices are now more and more needed within these communities? Will it be sort of the informal dimension, or sort of this coming together, encountering, so this very, very sloppy and easygoing way, or will it be a more strategic place to work, to come together on a fixed time slot, to then leave your home office or your corporate office and work there together? But then it's very sort of a very fixed working environment and working situation. So will it be more sort of the lively, informal, lifestyle-oriented, say, community dimension, or will it be sort of an important extension of the office, of the company, to specifically book and use specific external spaces? Or will it be something else? This is also possible for sure.
From my point of view, there are two things. It's more a work-life thing, in a holistic way, that, for instance, the question of children is really important, because in our space, there's a big garden, and for a lot of families, it's like the garden of their home and not the garden of their work. That means there's a hybrid use of this building. It's not in a normal work week there it's working for working space, but on the weekends it's a paradise for kids, you know. And I think these hybrid things are interesting. Like leisure can be interesting as well. And I think to create these coincidences, this is really important, because the formalization of a normal office, that's the problem itself, and we create this. We try to to find events that are not these team working, having fun together, but to create coincidences and to invite input from outside. Is a little example is our we have like a summer party. It's normal when you have a big garden in Berlin, but every year we try to invite special people to it on a special topic. We have the feeling they from our clients, from friends, and there we try to initiate relationships, new relationships. I think this is another aspect of it.
I don't think it's, I think the sloppy and lifestyle times are over. That's my opinion. And I can't see this here anyway in the rural area, because there's co-working as a lifestyle phenomenon that's always been connected to urban spaces, in my opinion. I think I agree with Axel, and I think it might even be more. I think co-working spaces can be an area where a certain structure will take place, and I think that's a good thing, like certain schedules when you're going to meet up, or when events are taking place, things like that. I think co-working spaces can become places where you just create future. You're not stuck in that corporate structure, and it's not completely at liberty as well, because I personally think that doesn't lead you too far either. I think it's a place where future can take place, where you can think about future, where you can work on future, and where you can create new structures that fit our world and our working fields in the years to come.
Comment on this or add this? So will the next generation of co-working spaces be something that we already know, like Bürgerhäuser or community houses in these peripheral areas? So will they have more and more functions to come together also for political decision-making processes, for other cultural effects? Will they be enriched more and more in order to to cope with sort of things that fall apart, that have been too big, that are not suitable anymore?
For me, it's like, I think there will be a more differentiation, if this word exists in English. For instance, there is in the Netherlands, there are quite some co-working spaces specialized on bureaucracy. That means that parts of the government of the city share space with new entrepreneurs, or from the social sphere, or from organization development. And there are co-working spaces more focused on cultural aspects. And I could imagine in rural countries, in rural areas, that there could be some places they're specialized in a topic, like farming or something, or like children, or like science, because there was this Flixtrain, a new train system in Germany, and they had, and it was really a nice idea. They have tables in these trains with topics that you can sit on the table. I'm interested in chemistry, and there's coming somebody like a professor or a student or a kid, or I don't know, it's also interested in. And there were so much nice meetings, like by coincidence, and I think this is a good idea for me, like that you have several spaces, not only one big one, several spaces that you can decide in the morning, okay, today I need a more focused work, next day I need a really a future orientated workspace, because for me, I don't want to think about future every day. It's a good thing to think about it one day a week. So I think this could be interesting.
Tina, you want to comment? Or
yeah, I can see those really highly collaborative spaces happen. I think that's the way we are going to go in our part of the rural country, because we're so small and so remote. I don't, surely there's a possibility of specialized co-working spaces, but in order to find kind of a crucial mass of participants and users, it will be the collaborative and the crossover thing in ways in the way you work, and part of in terms of the participants and who's going to use it. And we already are developing a vision of a space that's the base of the creative sector, a space that is a co-working space and a collaborative space, but a space that also has an impact on society, that can be used by other institutions or citizens projects, a space that is accessible to whoever needs it and who wants to use it, and to a space that is open to everybody who supports the original philosophy and the idea of the space. I think that is important. You can't do it at liberty. You can't just, I think you shouldn't just open it up and say, hey, whoever wants to come and participate, do. You need to make clear, what are you standing for? What are you trying to achieve here? What's your strategy? What's your philosophy? What are your values? And you need to ask people and participants to appreciate them and support them. But apart from that, I think, yeah, I think that's the future. This kind of spaces which are open to everybody who supports the idea.
Okay, we are coming a bit to our end. I like the last words you both mentioned, that there is a very positive future, you know, with ideas and inspiration for how these spaces could provide us a good social and working and functional environment for what we wanted to do. I think there will be more and more questions how this can be reached out to other milieus and social classes or groups. And how this could be approached in more details. So from my point of view, that was also an experiment to use COST. Thanks for all the supporting people in the back that we don't see so far, Alessandro, Ilaria, Mina in Norway, and also the RGCS network in Paris that also, I think, was co-organizing and co-hosting it today. That was also a very practical sort of encounter of two European networks that are interesting to get to know more about collaboration, co-working, and sort of community dimensions of work. So we're reaching out from the silo thinking to more cross-sectoral network thinking. I want to thank you both, Axel and Tina, to have you here in the room and to listen to your experiences. That was very interesting for all these insights in difficult changing times where you really don't know what's happening in the next 2, 3, 4 weeks so far. But I think if we stay tuned, if we stay online and to communicate more and more about what is happening, it's good. So also maybe there will be a day in the next future that you will also can profit from the results of these networks, and also the RGCS has very practical encounters worldwide. So maybe this is also an occasion for you to join these sometimes a bit academic oriented discussions, and that you might profit from some insights there. And also we would like to stay in contact with you for, well, following your agenda and your spaces and your activities. Thanks for all, also for those who have followed us on Facebook from my side. Maybe Viktoria, you also want to say something.
I think you said everything important. I also wanted to thank the people that are following us and for the good question as well. I really hope you learned something. Myself, I get a lot of new information today through this open seminar. It was also my first time doing an experiment like this, but I think it's very good, and I like the exchange. And thank you once more also to the speakers for your comments and sharing all your experience. It was a big profit, of course. Thank you so much. Okay, so I think we're coming to the end.
Now we are finishing. Before we maybe remain in the space and see what's happening technically, that we're going